Today's hearing is an important step on the path to a more sustainable transportation future. The depth of interest in this hearing, which resulted in 8 witnesses today, demonstrates the willingness and readiness of corporate America to be active partners in solving the monumental challenges we face regarding infrastructure and climate change. As we will hear today, both private sector action and sound public policy are necessary to meaningfully address climate change. This is not about whether we need either private voluntary reductions or government measures. We need both. We will need commitment at all levels of government, from the private sector to achieve significant reductions in carbon pollution, transportation sector, transition to large-scale decarbonization, and to invest in the infrastructure upgrades to make our assets and facilities resilient to extreme weather events and sea level rise. Further, to protect assets and to invest in emissions reductions will have real financial consequences to business and transportation agencies both now and in the long run. We'll hear those messages loud and clear today. In 2021, we have thankfully moved beyond the polarizing discussion of whether we need to act, which has stalled progress on an existential threat to our planet and our citizens for far too long. If any are here today to make that argument, I urge you to review the prepared remarks of our panel. Every one of the business leaders here today can confirm that denial of this reality is a bad business decision. But these decisions are about more than just the bottom line. We'll hear from our panel today that the transportation sector in particular holds tremendous promise for new norms that will move the needle on climate change. To quote from Mr. Smith's written testimony, "We believe that a connected world is a better world, and we recognize that with the privilege of connecting the world also comes the responsibility of being good stewards of the planet." While some sectors have begun to move in the right direction on climate, the same is not true in majority of the transportation sector, which is the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Over the last 3 decades, those emissions have risen 24%, more than any other sector. Passenger and freight vehicles account for 82% of transportation sector emissions, which is why so much of this hearing will focus on surface transportation policy. The contribution to the carbon pollution problem from the way we currently move people and goods is clear. The available solutions are equally plentiful and promising: conversion of personal vehicles, transit buses, trucks, locomotives to low and zero emission forms of power, providing alternative charging and fueling infrastructure, a rapidly expanding area that several witnesses will discuss today. Support of this transition through robust federal investment was a key element of the bill this committee approved in the last Congress as part of H.R. 2. Boosting investment in low and zero emission and more efficient modes of transportation, including transit, freight, passenger rail, walking, biking, is an equally important mitigation strategy, and we have several witnesses who actively work on projects to expand modal choice. H.R. 2 substantially increased investment in each of these modes while enhancing the safety of these options. Improved operational practices to reduce idling and traffic congestion will also help make better use of the infrastructure we have. That is smart use of our infrastructure, where we can get more throughput without having to add lane miles. And innovation within the construction sector to reduce or trap emissions produced through a life cycle of transportation project holds significant promise. H.R. 2 focuses heavily on the development and implementation of these technologies and practices. Each of these ideas taken together can add up to a substantial difference in mitigating the effects of climate change. Yet we know that we need to adapt is very real right now. Strengthening the ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from natural disasters and extreme weather is a major portion of the U.S. response to the ongoing impacts of climate change. We'll hear case examples from witnesses today about how these investments are no longer optional, but a necessity, and that the reality is impacting the way we build and rebuild transportation assets. Climate's changing rapidly. Time is not on our side. This committee intends to take bold steps, again, this Congress, to support significant emissions reductions from the transportation sector, and support for action among the business community is growing. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce recently issued updated policy that states durable climate policy must be made by Congress. At this time, I'll insert into the record a letter from Chamber President Suzanne Clark submitted for this hearing in support of addressing climate change. Without objection, so ordered. I thank each of our witnesses for being here today and persevering through what I know may be a long hearing. I know your time is valuable. The committee is grateful for your participation, and the time we invest in discussion today, however, is nothing compared to the time on earth we stand to pervert if we get this right. So again, thanks to all, and I will note that Mr. Smith has noted that he can only be here for 2 hours. Hopefully the other witnesses can stay. I expect we may go a little bit longer than that. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.